This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey, man. Hope this comes through loud and clear. I'm on a fairly busy road here and there, so there might be a bit of traffic noise in the background. Just on the nursery drop-off Thursday morning. Just incredible weather. I mean, absolutely perfect weather in terms of temperature, not a cloud in the sky, not too hot yet. It will be too hot later today, but right now it's like if you could bottle this up and just have this every day, all day, this is perfection. I wanted to send you a voice note now. It's the 1st of May, and it is... Well, last night I finished Animated April, my annual celebration of animated movies, where I watch one animated film every day throughout April. And I usually try and sort of build to a crescendo. So a lot of the films I'll watch throughout the month will be maybe more challenging works, maybe films that whilst they have a lot of value from a sort of history of animation perspective, they don't necessarily serve as like just a solid piece of entertainment by today's standards. So it's still very interesting and compelling to me in my animation nerddom, but not like, not necessarily gonna go in the pantheon of one of my favorite animated films of all time kind of thing. So I usually watch those earlier in the month, and then as the month progresses, I'm kind of putting in what I estimate will be better and better films. And then for the final film of the month, I usually try and put something that's like, this is really widely regarded as an excellent movie. It seems like a safe bet to be just like a fantastic time. So this year, I chose Robot Dreams as the final film of the month. It's very, very acclaimed at its release. I think it might have been nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's a weird category because this year we had Flow won it, which is a very, very, very small, low-budget Lithuanian film. But generally, how it works is you'll have something like Flow nominated, but then it will be Toy Story 4 that wins it or something. So you've got like one real small, proper, like outside of the Hollywood system type movie. Then you've got like one movie by a sort of big, like significant established animation studio like Cartoon Saloon or Aardman or Leica, that's still on the smaller side. It's not like a summer blockbuster, but it is something that will have got kind of wide release everywhere in the world. And then you've got like 2 or 3, basically whatever Sony has put out, whatever Disney has put out, whatever Pixar's put out. And kind of going back in time, it was always the big movie that, like, Pixar would only have to make a movie that was like decent to win it, whereas something from another country or whatever they'd have to make like the best fucking film ever made practically to win it. I think that's the tides are turning a bit on that. In fact, they just announced new rules for the Oscars, which I think most people's response was like, how is this already not a rule? But the new rules are that if you want to vote in a category like best costume design, you have to have seen all the films nominated in that category. Now, this won't be policed, and I'm sure people just vote as they always have done for like the one movie that they've heard of or the one movie they've seen or whatever. But theoretically, that could lead, if people really follow that rule, that could lead to a lot of industry people, members of the Academy, watching these more off the beaten track animated films. This one is a Spanish movie, but very palatable to an international audience or to an American mainstream audience, not least of all because it's set in New York. I was trying to pin down the era that it's set in. Some of it looks kind of 70s, but then you've got MTV, something like 80s. There's one bit where they're flying a kite and it looks very like 2000s, like it looks like new metal or Offspring kind of Blink-182 type aesthetics. It could be like late 90s or something. I think it's not trying to be exactly one era, but if I had to kind of make a stab at it, I'd probably say like early 90s, late 80s. One of the first things we see on screen in the movie is the main character, or one of the two main characters, playing Pong, which is why my brain was going 70s initially. But it's definitely set in a past New York. I think the opening shot might feature the Twin Towers and the New York skyline. So you're immediately put back in time. It's interesting because a film being a Spanish film and not set in Spain, like, oh, for whatever reason, they wanted to set it in Paris or they wanted to set it in New York or whatever it might be. Egypt could be anything. That's not surprising. That happens all the time. But you'd kind of think that if they're going to do that, especially in an animated film, that it would be a very superficial, kind of thin rendering of New York, where, yeah, you got the Statue of Liberty, maybe you got Central Park, but it doesn't feel like a New Yorker movie. It's more just like they wanted to set it in a big American city, so they chose the most iconic big American city. And that's not the case with this at all. This is as New York a movie as, you know, a Woody Allen movie or something. It feels like it's got references to Montauk and the Catskills. It's got so many references to really specific pieces of New York ephemera and like era-specific pieces of American culture, brands, stuff like that. It's really, really fleshed out. And that intrigues me. And I haven't done any research. I probably will. I watched it last night. I was quite tired, so I just sort of like watched it and then didn't do a deep dive on it. I'll now in the coming days be sort of listening to podcasts about it and looking at the making of it and whatnot. I did briefly look at the director, and it seems to be the case that he hasn't made animated films in the past, that his career has been as a live action director, sometimes quite stylized live action, but not animation, which is always interesting when a non-animation filmmaker makes an animated movie. I would not have guessed that about this film. It's very competent. It feels like it's coming from like a very established animation studio. Like what they're taking on here, the amount of drawings, the amount of detail in the backgrounds and stuff, doesn't feel like, oh, let's just try a hand at animation. It feels like we just professionally make animation. I don't know, again, who's involved. Maybe there is a very established studio that's a sort of part of the operation. But yeah, I loved the era and location specificity. I was saying to my wife as we were watching it, you know, if you want to make a movie set in like Marseille, maybe you have to like fly all the animators there to like walk around and get their sketchbooks out and make observations. But I think there's got to be no city in the world more documented than New York. Even if you want a specific metro station in a specific year, you've probably still got endless photographic reference material of that. So I've been to New York a few times. This film really rang true to me. And obviously I've seen hundreds of New York movies, and this, you know, it feels like it's in there. If I was like thinking of New York movies now, like Taxi Driver and stuff, this would have to go in the mix as like, yeah, it's a very, very New York movie, which is interesting because there's many things that make this unlike normal movies are certainly unlike normal New York movies. One, it's animated, that's the obvious one. Secondly, it's all animal characters. Thirdly, and this is one of my sort of pet, whatever the, no pun intended, but like whatever the opposite of pet hate is, like a sort of a thing that I just always love and rarely rears its head, although it does more in animation. But it's the film that's not a silent film, but doesn't have from dialogue. So I've always loved that. And it's a challenge. This film, I didn't feel like there was anything missing. I didn't feel like it was like, yeah, it was 80% clear what was going on, but sometimes they didn't manage to connect the dots because of the lack of dialogue. I definitely didn't feel that here. I felt that it was like just crystal clear the entire way. And it's not a cookie cutter plot in a way. It's not like complex, like the mind bending, crazy, you've never seen anything like this before, but it's not just following like a classic Disney template or something. So the plot is that you've got a character. Now he's a dog, and he's obviously referenced as a dog, and sometimes he behaves like a dog with his tail wagging or him digging on the beach or something like that. But he's also very anthropomorphized to the point where you kind of read him as just like a person, like a I don't know, 30 something or whatever, living on his own in a big city. And he is lonely, and he sees a commercial for robot companions. And this movie would have been made just before the AI explosion. So obviously we've been making AI movies forever and sentient robot movies forever, but it's just interesting that this is kind of like the last movie that its production, at least, and its screenwriting would have happened before generative AI and large language models and machine learning and all that became like massively mainstream. So he watches this commercial and he sees this robot, and he buys it or whatever and sets it up, and they have a great time. They have a beautiful, beautiful friendship, and for quite a while, I mean, I don't know how long it really is, but it felt quite a while that the movie is just like them hanging out and just having a blast and a montage, and you really feel the value of their friendship. There are other movies about friendship, but there's not that many. It's like not the most common subject matter for a movie. I think of Step Brothers as a movie, for example, Dumb and Dumber, I guess, but just a movie that really like goes out of its way to show you how much, or just like how fulfilling this and how rewarding this platonic relationship is just nice to see. And it goes on for so long that I actually turned to my wife and I said, imagine if this was the whole movie. Imagine if nothing bad happened and this was just a movie about them hanging out and having a good time. And she said, you think something bad is going to happen? I was like, well, it's a movie. Like, it's just funny how she's just so like immersed. I find that a lot, where like I'll sort of see the screenwriting narrative gears in motion, and she won't have sort of seen that, so it hits her much harder. A lot of plot elements in movies hit her harder because she's not like just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So they go to a beach, and there's some anxiety about whether or not the robot should get in the water, but he does, and everything seems fine. They have a blast. They lie out in the sun, and unfortunately over the course of the day he rusts up, and it's impossible for the dog to carry him or move him or bring him home. And that is just a genuinely terrifying scene. I don't mean terrifying as in like horror. I mean just the kind of the sorrow and the dread, the like dawning on you that like, and dawning on the dog character that it's over. I might actually have lost this friend. I finally feel actualized. I'm no longer lonely. This isn't a movie about, in the early stages, it seems like it's going to be a movie about how, it's all fool's gold. It's not going to, you can't have a robot friend and actually there's some power imbalance or there's some reason why this is going to turn sour, but that's not where this movie's going. The movie is not making the claim that having a fake robotic friend is ultimately shallow and unfulfilling, or that robots are just not equipped to provide that level of partnership. It's just a really unfortunate, tragic event happens that separates them, and it just happens that the last day of the beach season, so the next day when he comes back to try and collect his robot and oil him up and get him back working again, it's too late. The beach is closed until the next summer. And we see, a few attempts that he makes to get back in. He does his best, but he just can't do it. Obviously, it's a cartoon, like there's limitations to how far they're going to go with things, but it feels like he makes an earnest attempt. And so we've got this weird movie where you're expecting, okay, now when he loses his friend and they get separated, you're going, well, I've seen animated movies before. I've seen Toy Story. I've seen them all. This is now going to be an adventure of them getting back together again. The robot's going to go on an adventure, and the adventure is going to be finally lead them back to, reunion. The dog maybe is going to be going, they're both going to be doing their simultaneous adventuring, but that's not what this movie is. The movie is the robot lying on the beach for the entire movie, practically, for months and months and months and season after season, and the dog having to kill time and go, okay, I'm not going to be able to get him back until next summer. I have to try and make the most of my life until then. And that's literally, ultimately, there's a third act of the movie where it does kind of come back to like, are they going to get back together? How's that going to happen? But for the majority of the movie, it is just like one character is tasked with waiting on a beach, just lying there, and the other character is tasked with living in this kind of limbo state and trying to fulfill themselves in absence of their friend. And as a plot for any movie, like I'm reminded of Ghost Story, the Casey Affleck movie, which is a little bit like that. It's like, well, there's not really much I can do. I've just got to wait this. I'm just waiting, and other stuff will happen. The movie can be eventful and enjoyable and entertaining, but I'm not gonna really be a particularly active character. So yeah, for any movie that would be an unusual sort of plot, but for an animated movie, particularly unusual. Unheard of, I would say, from my personal experience, and very, very challenging. It's not a short movie either, like it's fairly long, and there was a massive opportunity for this film to be boring, and I'll speak for myself. I found it to be not remotely boring, like not even the tiniest, slightest bit boring. I found it to be very engaging the whole way through, because if you lie on the beach for a year, or if you try and build a nice life for yourself, or escape loneliness, whatever, for a year, a lot happens, and there's enough to fill a movie, or to fill a kind of middle act of a movie. It's by turns relatable in terms of like, what's he going to do? Is he, how does he feel living in the big city, looking at other people, kind of having with their different lives? He's got this thing where he's like trying to feel, he's trying to fill the void essentially, but then occasionally he'll sort of remember his robot friend, and he'll be like, oh man, this is the big thing I'm missing. It's very much a relationship movie, but it's not like a one-for-one analogy of a specific relationship that exists in our life. Like, it often evokes romantic love, unrequited love, feelings that you have for an ex, friendship, of course, all these just general loneliness of like feeling like I need to connect with people and I'm not. But it's not an exact, like, it is also just about this character of being friends with a robot. So that's kind of, it doesn't just feel like you're watching one big analogy where like really they're talking about something different. They're talking about these characters in this situation. And we see the dog like doing Halloween, a brief relationship he has with this duck character. And it's all just like very mumblecore, little observations, little vignettes, little kind of misadventures that one has in this crazy old world. And then for the robot, he is completely at the mercy of anyone who comes along, whether it's those little birdies that come along and sort of the journey they go on, the kind of like parental journey that bird goes on with its little babies, and one of them is particularly attached to the robot, or those characters that come along in the boat, and the dreams, man, the tragedy of like he's you don't know it, but what you're actually watching is a fantasy of how things might work out, of him being rescued or saved or whatever, and then the crushing reality of what's really happening. That is a sledgehammer. Like, obviously there's only so many times they can do it before you kind of get wise to it, but the first time that happens with the characters in the boat, where it turns out that they're just breaking his leg off, it's genius. It reminds me of like La La Land or something, where we get to see one version and then we see the real version, which is not that you can do that wrong. I was that Mission Impossible movie where they show Tom Cruise doing the job and he does it in a way where it's like he kills people, stuff like that, and then you go, oh no, that was just one way it could have hypothetically gone. Now we'll see the real thing. That I thought that was pretty bad. So it's not like you can just always pull this out of the hat and it always works. It has to be done delicately. And even like the sound design element of it, where when we get towards the end of the dream, we're kind of hearing or seeing elements of the reality that's waking him up from a filmmaking perspective and a screenwriting perspective. Those moments work so well. And this film is very, very heartbreaking, in my opinion. It's like, it's not Sophie's Choice or something. It's not like you're ruined after watching it, but there are moments of, what's the word? Sort of insensitivity, and it's hard now because it's like, this is a robot character, so everyone's going to feel differently about, everyone in this world that we're watching is going to feel differently about the kind of respect that this character deserves. It's always a very interesting subject matter within anything about robots. And I won't even necessarily like open that can of worms debate now in this voice note, though, you know, I'm happy to indulge in it if you're interested. But there's kind of casual cruelty that we see in this movie, which is maybe not cruelty. I guess it's a philosophical opinion, but it's certainly you as an audience member have come to love and empathize with this robot. So seeing people kind of get their hands on him and just basically dismember him is just really cuts deep as an audience member. It did for me anyway. And then when Rascal, the raccoon, happens upon him and sort of like rebuilds him up and gives him a new life and something to believe in again, that is so affecting because of that. And the ending, the moment where, like that moment where he's just having a fun barbecue and he's just going to get some ketchup, and he's in the flow of that, he's in the midst of that emotion and that feeling, and then he's walking past a window and it's just like, oh, I'm 100% back on that now. And obviously the way the character is now with another robot, the dog, and the dream sequence of him going to the light, and then the realization that that's doesn't work, that's no longer what should be happening, but the desire to share a moment with the music, and then the dog having to go through, like, the acting, for want of a better word, on the dog's face, the sort of like searching, looking up, and all of these feelings under the surface brimming. Like, this is, again, La La Land is a good kind of point of comparison, but this is such a movie filled with human moments of like desire and fear and like just looking for the answers. We see in that scene the robot character looking back through the open doorway at Rascal, like barbecuing and going, "This is my life now," and at the end of the movie everybody's happy, and which is, I love that. Like I'm rarely that cynical about a happy ending, but certainly in a movie like this I feel that the happy ending is absolutely earned, rather than, and it's also it's a bittersweet ending, because the happy ending is that the relationship that you've spent the whole movie wishing could happen again, it's no longer right that it happens again. It's better that is moved on from, and the feelings that they have for each other, the robot and the dog, will always be real, and they'll always be a part of those characters, but they're going to take those feelings and kind of bring them into the next relationships in a positive way, which is again why it's not a one-for-one with like actual real human relationships, because the relationship they have is kind of like a romantic relationship in a way, because it's a life partner, soulmate type of thing in a non-sexual way, in a kind of non-romantic way, but it is a relationship between a human, which is essentially what the dog is, human stand-in, and a robot. So it's a bit different to just like going, wait, I thought they were, why can't all four of them be friends together? It's like, well, because that's not exactly what this is. But yeah, loved this movie. Really hope that the director returns to animation. The actual aesthetic of this kind of like, it's almost like Nickelodeon, very like vectory, very flat colors and stuff. It is not cinematic at all. The amount of detail, the amount of visual detail on screen is something that elevates it. You can see that a TV production couldn't really invest this much time into it, so that kind of sets it apart. But it's not my favorite aesthetic. When I over the years seeing images of this movie, I've never been drawn to it on an aesthetic level, and I think it works fine. I think the strength of it is in the actual animation and the exact facial expressions and stuff like that. It works really well, and just like the editing, the filmmaking, everything is incredible. But if we just take the actual art style alone, I don't think it's particularly beautiful or anything. But yeah, that's fine. I loved, well, it wasn't even I loved, but I was surprised to see that they use real brands. I mean, I can count on one hand the amount of animated films that when they want to show cornflakes, they don't make up their own fake version of cornflakes. They literally just show cornflakes. This movie is just non-stop real graphic design, real brands. And that was just an interesting choice. I was wondering, actually, like, do we not see that in other movies because they're like, I don't want to give them a freebie. I don't want to give them product placement if they're not paying me. Or do we not see it because they're like, oh, Coca-Cola could sue us if we don't have permission to use their logos or whatever. And maybe, Coca-Cola could come in and go, you associated our brand and our logos with a non-positive thing. I really don't know all the legal side of this, but it's nice. And it again, because it's animated in a very cartoony way, it's animal characters and it's animal and robot characters. I think to offset all of that and counterbalance it with realism, you've got to make it like a very realistic New York with all specific references. You've got to make it like a specific era. You've got to make it real brands. And that brings it back down to, brings it a little bit more back down to earth, so to speak. And there's one moment where my wife noticed that Basquiat walks by with a lion version of him. And I think there's when there's a scene with metal rockers on MTV, I was like, is that Metallica or what? Who is that? It's kind of like nice little era specific references along the way as well. So yeah, there's probably a lot more to talk about with this movie, to be honest, but that's what comes to mind now, and I've got to get home because I'm actually running late for work. So yeah, really, really liked this movie.
and it was a lovely end to Animated April for me this year.
Hey man, all I've got in my head since waking up this morning is on and on, on and on. Yeah, as you can tell, my singing career hasn't worked out. So yeah, I watched Robot Dreams last night. I had a little bit of an issue finding a copy, and I had to wait until it was on a specific streaming service. I initially thought that the streaming service failed me because I had a really hard time getting subtitles, and as I heard it's a Spanish movie, I was looking for subtitles, and then I was watching it initially, and at a certain point I realized, oh, maybe the reason why I can't find subtitles is because we're not going to get any dialogue in this movie. And I spent about 20 minutes messing around with those descriptive subtitles, if you know what I mean. The sound of a fridge opening, the sound of a computer beeping. I spent ages trying to get those subtitles to match before I realized, hold on, wait a minute. That doesn't matter. We're not going to get any dialogue here. So once that settled down, I got on board with the film. It's funny. I don't think this has ever happened to me, but I wasn't in the mood for this film, and indeed this type of film last night. I watched it because I know you had sent me a voice note about it, and I wanted at least your thoughts to be somewhat fresh. And about 5 or 10 minutes into this, and especially with the subtitle mix-up, I thought, oh no, it's gonna be no dialogue movie. I wasn't ready for that. And no dialogue animation movie. I don't know how I feel about that. And it's a credit to the movie that even though I wasn't in the mood for this type of movie, and I will clarify that by saying, you know, sometimes you're thinking, oh, I want to watch an action movie tonight. I'm gonna watch a dumb Jason Statham beekeeper workman, Amazon fresh delivery guy, whatever career he has now. I'm gonna watch that movie. And even though the movie might be questionable, because you know what you're watching, you're very much prepared for what it has to offer. And I guess that's an advantage you have for Animated April. Obviously, a lot of animated movies are different, but at least you know it's going to offer animation. It's going to offer a part of this festival atmosphere you have, a part of something to contrast and compare with. It's got all these things. Whereas if you're not in the mood for a movie, you're putting on a movie and then you don't know what you're going to be in for. And after about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I thought, oh, this is going to be long. Especially after that other movie I watched just before this. I was even more unforgiving. And early into this film, I settled in and started to enjoy myself. And by the closing moments of this movie, I had probably one of the strongest emotional reactions I had to a movie in a long time. And to be clear, I liked the movie up to this point, but the swell of emotion and conflicting feelings that hit me at that moment was crazy for a movie like this, which on the surface is about a dog who's friends with a robot. And so first of all, as you said, there's no dialogue in this movie. It's very much just watching a relationship unfold visually. And what happens quite often with these type of movies and when I say these type of movies, I mean movies with no dialogue, especially if it's these type of ones that are either animated or like a tragic comedy. They usually lean on slapstick a hell of a lot, and I love slapstick. I think it's fantastic. I'm big fans of Mr. Bean, and Shaun the Sheep actually had a movie where it was complete slapstick and the lack of dialogue. In this, they don't go down that route at all. And not to be dismissive of slapstick, because it's really hard to get right, but this is a harder path to follow, because if you're not filling your moments with clown-like comedy or insane physical violence played for comedy, you have to be very insightful and very specific and really think in everything you're trying to convey, and you're going to have to do a lot more. And this movie certainly does a lot more. I believe it's based on a comic book, actually, from what I read, by someone named Sarah Varon. And it's set in 1984, but like you said, there's a lot of leeway with what they show in this movie, and the different things. And I don't think it's trying to be historically accurate. Case in point, he orders a robot as a friend, so I don't think historical error realism was what they was going for. But the shots of the Twin Towers, which we see in the city skyline quite often, is very iconic, and it returns to it quite a bit, and it doesn't really make a point. It doesn't really make you think of 9/11, although in a way you can't not. But it just feels very much like you said, you're watching a movie from somebody's point of view who knows New York. There was even locations in this movie that I thought, oh, right, that's the same place in Mr. Robot or Boardwalk Empire. That's the same boardwalk. That looks very familiar. They must have used the same filming location. It almost gives me that impression. And it's drawn, so it's obviously you can't use a filming location. And even when they're walking down the streets and the pavements and the sidewalks, I'm thinking, oh, I think I saw Dustin Hoffman walk down that street. And yeah, I was shocked to find out that it's a Spanish-French production, unless the comic is from... I'm just after reading now that Sarah Varon is a graphic novelist from America, although she did grow up in Illinois. But yeah, so okay. So she is the one who give this movie the feeling of New York and the iconography. And like you said, it's not the iconography of the Eiffel Tower of France. It's just the streets, the sidewalks, the people, even though they're animals. It's very well observed. And as you mentioned, this movie starts off and the dog is a bit lonely. Again, it's displayed very well because the dog looks over at the next window, I think, and it's a couple sitting down having TV. Oh, he wants companionship. And I don't know, again, I don't know what the age group is for this movie, but I can imagine a kid watching this movie as well. And a lot of the feelings being displayed will resonate with them, even if the exact specifics don't. I couldn't pinpoint what type of relationship this movie was trying to show, whether it's friendship, whether it's a relationship. I don't know, but I think kids and adults will be able to be empathetic with the feeling that it's trying to convey constantly in this movie. And as you said, the movie starts off and everything's going well. And it's funny, you mentioned your wife. When I'm watching something with my partner as well, I've got my screenwriter hat on, and it's really nice being able to watch it from their point of view, because that's going to hit harder if you're not suspecting that. And as you said, when your wife was saying that, oh, you think something bad's going to happen? I'll be 10 minutes into a movie and I'll be thinking, okay, well, this is the setup. Then something has to happen. And then I'm already 2 steps ahead. But if I'm sucked into that moment and not expecting anything to happen, it's going to get the full devastation it deserves from people who aren't jaded cinephiles. And yeah, they go to the beach and the robot gets stranded there, and that's basically the setup. But as you rightly said, at this point, I'm thinking, oh, we're going to get a really big sequence of this dog trying to break into the beach, doing all these hilarious antics and try again just to rescue the robot. That's where we're going with this. And I love the logic of the movie as well, where the dog tries that a few times and gets a record, a criminal record, and then that's it. The dog has to wait until the beach opens for a whole year. There's no explaining that my robot is on the beach. Can I please get my robot, good sir? And again, if you're a younger audience member watching this, then you're not going to think of the logic anyway. So it works on 2 levels. It works for kids, where it's going to be a very literal logic of the dog not being able to get in to the beach. And if you're watching it as an adult, then you're watching it on a completely different level, and you're not really going to question the logic anyway. And at that point, the movie goes off in a totally different direction, where I'm thinking, how is this going to sustain itself? I'm totally lost where we're going to go here. And we get a dog, as you rightly said, missing something through season to season. And the little details of the seasons are really good as well, where we have Halloween and we have the feeling of the seasons as well. Like, you can do the obvious thing for Halloween, which this movie does, where people dressed up as ghosts and trick-or-treating, but just in the atmosphere and the ambience of the seasons in this, you can really feel the seasons going by. And then when you see the dog in his apartment, and he's not writing Christmas cards, but he's doing something Christmas related, and it's not wrapping presents, but it's just something you would do at home around that time. And all these things really fantastically realizes each season. And then what it manages to do is allow you to focus on the multi layers of emotion of the dog character as we do as people. You know, you might be getting your costume ready for Halloween, and then the thought might hit you, and then you're still being mindful in the moment or trying to be mindful of the season, and something else is going on in your head that takes you away from it and drifts you away. And in this case, it's the robot. So I thought that was really good and something you don't normally see. And yeah, the dreams. My goodness. So the first dream sucker punched me as well, where the people on the boat go to the beach, and then they see this robot, and you get the sequence where he's rescued, and we get hit the robot walking along whistling to On and On, which was such a great recurring gag of just when things are going well, that song is playing again, which again pays off amazingly at the end. And then when he goes there, and then you realize it's a dream, and that's heartbreaking. And initially you're a bit confused, but then I realized, okay, so anytime the robot doesn't have the leg, it's a dream. And then that allowed me to follow it more coherently. And then I had a thought to myself, because obviously we get the dog having dreams as well. We see some of the dog's dreams, and then we see some of the robot's dreams. And I think what this movie does very well, both in the waking hours of these characters and the moments that these characters spend asleep, is really show the subconscious thoughts of the mind that sometimes are in the back of your mind, and there's a feeling there that you can't quite articulate in your thoughts. And then there's other times when you're actually having the dream and your exact thoughts articulate themselves perfectly, like the robot being worried about being replaced, and the dog being worried about not being good enough, not being able to fit in, and not being liked by society. Like, we get that great sequence where the dog goes to that bowling alley with that snowman, which is such a great visual a visual scenario, where the snowman is drinking slushies and it keeps on changing the color of his big fucking snow head. Like, that is beautiful to watch, and it can be enjoyed by adults and kids alike. I can just imagine myself, if I saw that as a kid, that type of subtle gag, and I wouldn't even call it a gag, maybe a subtle detail, really would make an impression on me and stay with me as a kid. I've definitely got stuff like that. When D'Artagnan, I used to watch the Three Musketeers and the Musket Hounds, and the way D'Artagnan used to chop an apple into slices and throw it up in the air, that stayed with me for a long time. So I can just imagine something like the snowman changing colors staying with you. It's perfect, really. And then on top of that, we get this great scene where the dog throws the bowling ball, and there's a long moment as the ball agonizingly rolls towards the pin, and you're thinking, oh, he might actually get a strike here once it touches it. Of course, this movie is always taking the less obvious road, and the bowling ball doesn't touch the pin, and everybody laughs at the dog, and he wakes up from a horrible dream. filled with nice moments like that. And of course, we get the subplot with the robot and the 3 birds or 4 birds. That's just the Disney short in itself. It's so good the way this movie often takes you to these little places and little subtle moments that you don't see ahead of them appearing. There's one scene where we're just getting a sweeping shot of the New York staircases and fire exits, and we get a little shot with a little bit of sound of this Chinese instrument that almost fills the air of the city. That's really good. And often throughout this movie, we get this Hey Arnold type of lively jazz that undercores every action of the characters, that goes a long way of really filling out this city. And we get the third act then that just takes this movie to a whole other level. Again, we feel like we know where this movie is going. We're counting down the seasons the way the dog is counting down the seasons. And obviously, there's really good distractions along the way. And we're often guessing where this movie's going to go by this point. He starts a relationship with this duck who reminds me as the training lady in Police Academy. I don't know if she was based on her, but she was muscle bound and capable, and we just see this nice relationship unfold. And there's a really good scene where they fish together, and the dog finally catches a fish, and he feels bad for the fish, and he throws the fish back in because he feels bad, and then the duck catches that same fish, and it's never outwardly stated that that's what happened, but it's just a great visual moment that you need to pay attention for. And as I said, I wasn't particularly in the mood for this movie, and then it got me paying attention, and there was so many interesting things that the movie kept ebbing and flowing to that demanded this attention. And then we get this whole scenario where things go well for the robot. He gets a new friend, and dog has a new friend, and the dog is a very well realized character just in his facial expressions or facial animations. It sounds crazy to say, but the dog is very multi-layered in what he conveys. Or yeah, I think it's a he. That you feel really sorry for this dog, and you really are rooting for this dog, and because of that, you're really rooting for his reconciliation with the robot. And then again, this movie doesn't give us what we want, but gives us what we need, and that's the robot, after being found on the beach by this monkey with gold teeth. And I love that little detail again, where the monkey finds a watch and he smiles and you can see his gold teeth. And then he sees a robot, which is even worth more money, and he displays both of his gold teeth. That's just very good, subtle visual storytelling that we get so much of in this movie. And then we see him having a great time with Rusty, and Rusty treats him well. Rusty gives him his own tapes of his favorite music, and then he's got 2 playlists, Robot's favorite playlist and Rusty's favorite playlist. Then he's dancing, having a great time, things are going well, and then he sees Dog, and it is something like La La Land, where we get to have our cake and eat it, but it's almost like we're lactose intolerant. So we shouldn't have been eating that cake in the first place, and only by eating it, Did we know that it was bad for us? And we get this reconciliation that we want to see, where the robot chases down dog, and we think we want the reconciliation. It's what we've been waiting for. It's really dramatic. He's running down the street. We don't think it's going to happen. Then he touches dog, and for a minute, all is well in the world, except it's not. And that didn't happen. The robot thinks of Rusty. He thinks about the other robot, perhaps. We can read into so much, even though so much hasn't been said, which is a credit to the movie. And again, if you remember, one of Robot's biggest fears was being replaced by another robot. But here, he's accepting what has happened and that things have changed. And he knows that they'll always be linked and they'll always have their time together. And that plays out in this fantastic sequence where that song plays, which has been the spine of this movie through good times and bad times. And we get this split screen of them dancing by themselves as the robot plays the music that permeates the streets of New York. And the dog hears it, he recognizes he loves that song, and he's having a dance by himself. And it's just a split screen joy to watch, and it really is so sad and so beautiful, and it says so much. And we get a reconciliation that is far more innovative and far more bittersweet and far more original than we would ever expect to see. And in the undertone of that is the dog looks up and he feels the robot is up in that window, and he has a sad face, but then he looks at his new robot and there's a joy, and it's just so complicated emotionally of the human experience, ironically from the point of view of a robot and the point of view of a dog. And then the dog walks off skipping and enjoying, and the robot goes back to Rusty. And you're left devastated and happy at the same time. It's so conflicting. And by the end of that movie, I was thinking, I feel like I've been walloped here. And not in a bad way at all.
Hey man, just walking to work now on a Tuesday morning. Bit cooler than it has been lately, but still a nice day. Really good to hear your thoughts there. It's been a week or two since I saw the movie, so I'd forgotten a lot of the little details that you mentioned. As you say, it is a movie that is one of the massive strengths of the film is just all of these tiny little micro details that are just always so on point. The movie doesn't put a foot wrong, and yeah, it's one of the best films I've seen lately. Nice sort of hearing your thoughts. You've got a better memory. I think you probably remember a film 2 weeks later more than I remember it the next day. So just it really sings in these details, and yeah, just completely agree with everything you said. Actually, as you were describing it there, I hadn't made this connection before, but the movie Past Lives came to mind, which is a film that I know we both liked a lot from recent years. And one thing that made Past Lives so like it was excellent, but it was like valuably unique in the film landscape, was because you got the opportunity to sit down and watch a movie that was about really, really complicated emotional situations, really complex. Usually it's like, you got your people that you're like sort of protagonist, your antagonist, you're kind of feeling sympathy for the bad stuff that protagonist goes through, but this level of complexity it takes so much time to untangle, or you're not even supposed to solve it really, or untangle it. You're just supposed to think about it, and let it impact you. And that's what real life is like. This very often anyway. I love this setup that we get here of the movie makes you want these two characters to get back together. They then create a situation where it's not right for the two characters to get back together, and they're forever blocked. And there is a tragedy to that, but it's also nobody's fault. I know life is more complicated than just every loose end getting resolved neatly and tied back up. Life evolves, moments pass, and I already loved the ending before listening to your voice note, but hearing you again kind of sing its praises is one of the best endings I've seen in a film in a very long time. And endings of films are rarely the best part. In fact, I think a good film usually has a nothingy ending, right? Even a great film, the ending is like they didn't fuck it up. Occasionally films have amazing endings. It's often because it's a twist or it's something kind of showy that flips everything on its head, which is fine. And there's some that I love like that. Sometimes it's because it's kind of an action movie, or it's like, a movie that like is getting increasingly more intense, whether it's horror or action or something like that. And therefore the ending kind of does what the rest of film has been doing, but in a more extreme way. So if you already liked what John Wick was doing in its beginning and its middle, wait till they go all out in the ending kind of thing. But a kind of relationship drama, to have an ending like this that is just so, as you said, it just completely bowls you over, and it's so thought-provoking. Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm really glad I've seen this movie, and I think I definitely will be recommending this widely to people. I think it's like a must-see film, and I believe, like I said, an animated debut by the director, which is really, really impressive. Just touching on some of the things you raised there in your voice note, it's funny, that thing with subtitles. Like, I've often been in that situation where you're watching a movie and you're like, do I need subtitles for this? A, has it got dialogue? B, maybe it's a movie that's in English and has occasional bits of another language, but you don't know if you're supposed to understand the other language. Like recently, a film came out called A Real Pain, directed by Jesse Eisenberg. And the intention, as far as I understand it, of that film is that you're supposed to be like the two English-speaking main characters in the movie, traveling around Poland and not understanding what the Polish people say. So even when they say, like, 3 sentences in a row, you're supposed to be just standing there as like the dumb American guy. I don't know what you're saying, the thing. So I think the intention of that film is that subtitles are never officially made. So any subtitles we'll find online of that film are kind of breaking the director's vision. And it could be you just don't know these things before you watch a film. I'm often in a weird situation with subtitles because my wife, English is her second language, and although she speaks English pretty much perfectly, what she has struggled with is regional accents. A lad gone down to shop, like that kind of off the beaten path type of accent. She needs subs if we're watching a film or TV show where she feels that there might be some more colorful characters in it. So, when I have to have subs and when I don't have to have subs is like an ongoing, complicated process. I probably should have just told you beforehand that this is a dialogue-free movie, because I think, in my opinion, if you don't need subs, then you shouldn't have subs, because subs create various issues. One, you're looking at the bottom of the screen instead of like the full frame, which means that you'll miss out on some amount of subtlety, some amount of the aesthetic experience, some pieces of acting. 2, subs are spoilers. They tell you the whole sentence
even though it might take the actor like 5 seconds to say the whole sentence if they're, you know, putting in dramatic pauses and stuff like that. So you're kind of undercutting the drama a little bit. 2, they if you're watching something with tension, you're watching someone like really slowly and like terrified sneaking around the apartment, and then a big massive white text at the bottom of the screen pops up and says gunshot sounds or something. Yeah, okay, gunshot's about to sound. Like it breaks the tension. If it's for hard of hearing, then they can have a whole bunch of stuff. They also subtitle stuff you're not supposed to hear. I never really realized how much dialogue there is in films, like films that I've grown up watching, films that I've seen many, many times, that you're not supposed to hear. You watch almost any major film that we would have grown up on, it's filled with kind of like background dialogue that if you're really sort of dialed in, maybe it can be a rewarding detail, but also maybe it can detract. Maybe it's supposed to be read as just people are talking in a general sense, rather than this is weighted as heavily as like the main character's monologue. But yeah, it's complicated anyway. It's interesting that you went through that journey with this film. Yeah, the ending, I mean, it's also like, it's a great ending, but it's also like everything, the whole journey of the film kind of comes together. And if you imagine this film without that ending, imagine it where it's like the robot and the dog get back together. There's no other robot and Rascal isn't involved. It's just like those two characters have been apart for the whole movie, and then, you know, they managed to find their way back together. Just imagine that, like, kind of the obvious version of this film if, like, Illumination made it or something. Even though we'd still have every other scene in the film, more or less, like we'd have all the detail, all the strengths of the film, the period setting, the, you know, the birds, the duck character. We'd have, like, the film would be absolutely loaded with great stuff, but it would be such a disposable film ultimately. And it's amazing how enjoyable a film can be without having any real depth or resonance to it. So the fact that when you get to the end, you're like, okay, every single thing else that's happened in this movie has been in service of this moment is really so powerful. You talked about the presence of the Twin Towers and kind of how it comes back to that and what that sort of evokes. It's an interesting one. Like, obviously, of course, it makes you think of 9/11, but only like in the sense of like you associate them with 9/11. They are an iconic image that I think anyone in the world, when they see them, the first thing they think is 9/11. But your mind doesn't linger on that. I think for me, what it does is it immediately goes the past, right? It goes pre-2001 as soon as I see that. And even though 5 minutes into the movie, many other elements have clearly told you that the film is pre-2001, every time they go back to that image, it's like, okay, pre-2001, like it just draws a line in the sand. And there's many things that draw a line in the sand, but they're all kind of doing the same thing, I suppose. And I think, I mean, I don't, of course, I'm just sort of speculating here, but for me at least, I think the age that I am, the age that you are, probably the age that, like the rough age that people who made this film and made the graphic novel, I'd imagine, like I'm just guessing here, but I imagine they're between like 30 and 50. That, seeing those little iconic elements, like the Twin Towers, it goes, your past. Like we have a very personal relationship with anything that we remember from our past. And so weirdly, even though, you know, you're looking at something that you associate with a terrorist attack, when you see it, you go, oh, simpler times in a way. I mean, it was obviously before the terrorist attack, you know that, but just forgetting about those loaded implications, you just see old stuff. And so much of like social media is kind of like preying upon this comforting, cozy, remember when things were simpler and it wasn't all of the stuff that you now find
uncomfortable in the world didn't exist yet. Like, the film has that, but because it's such an emotionally complex film and it's overall about quite heartbreaking subject matter, it doesn't feel like the film is just like pouring sugar over your head. But yeah, it's an interesting little device that they went with there. You mentioned how well you can feel the seasons passing in watching this film. Yeah, I agree. We watched a film recently called The Peasants, which is structured in 4 sections, one for each season. And I can't think of other examples, but I know I've seen a lot of films over the years that have that structure, that are about the seasons passing. And I think I've even seen ones that, like The Peasants, that have title cards for each season. I think a quick Google would probably reveal like a bunch of lists of movies that are structured around seasons, either like very overtly or just kind of as a background element, as it is here in this movie. But structuring a film across a year is really, it's very neat and it's very relatable. Everyone knows what a year is. Everyone knows the time implications of a year. Everyone knows the implications of it being this part of the year or that part of the year. Obviously, go from culture to culture, they have different things, like they might not have Halloween or whatever, but it's a nice structure, and I've never really given it much thought, but I know I've seen it quite a lot over the years, and I'd be curious now that it's kind of like front of mind, to have a look and see what famous films or what films I like actually have that 1 year structure, and maybe kind of bring the seasons quite prominently into the picture. And you talked about how that interlude, if you were to call it that, of the little birds befriending the robot is kind of like a Disney short. Just made me think of the fact that this film is sort of a anthology of short films in a way, and not directly, not literally, but there's an element of that. And throughout Animated April every year, I often find myself watching anthologies of shorts, but they're obviously not connected, and you get a little fatigued sometimes. I'm just like, okay, I've gone through the ending 5 times already. We're starting again. But then if you watch a film that's not vignettes and it's just like one big long story, then it's hard to pace it in a way that you don't get fatigued with that, and you're not like, okay, come on, let's go. So I think this film, which is sort of like short stories, however you want to put it, but all in service of one broader narrative, I think that's a really nice little structure. And I think, on a sort of pacing level, it's a very, very comfortable film to watch, or at least it was for me. So there's something to that. But yeah, anyway, I'm getting close to the office now, so I'll wrap this up. But really great film. Looking forward to seeing more from the director. I agree with what you said about the dog's acting and the acting of all the characters. It's amazing how, like, sort of character design this minimal, like both the dog and the robot they have very little going on in terms of facial features, but they can really convey not only can they, but they do. Like, there's never a neutral face of just draw the robot, how the robot looks. It's always, everything they do is loaded. Even like the little subtle thing that the robot often does of just sort of like nodding his head directionally, kind of to say like, go on, do it, or whatever. Like, there's all of these quite small actions and quite small gestures and emotions that the characters exert that sell the movie. As you said, this is not a slapstick movie. This is a movie of small details, and yeah, fantastic stuff. Anyway, glad you enjoyed it. I'm now in the process of drafting up Animated April for next year, so hopefully I get another banger like this in the mix.
Hey man, I'm just out of work now. Your 16 minutes of wisdom of a voice note kept me going for the final few minutes there. So yeah, I think Past Lives is an absolute brilliant comparison. And when it's a animated movie that's evoking such things as La La Land and past lives. You just can tell how fantastically complicated it is, which is absolutely an insane thing to say. Not necessarily, but it's a very high standard, those two movies. But yeah, I think the other thing about the seasons in this movie as well is not only are they well realized and well depicted, they also allow you to settle into the routine and the life of Dog, because the main plot point in this movie is going to be when he rescues Robot. But because there's a date on a calendar, June the 1st, and it's pretty much defined strongly that he can't get back to the beach until that moment, that once it gets to the seasons, it allows us to settle in and just experience the day as how Dog would do it, and experience the seasons as of how Dog would do it. And I like what you said as well, that it allows the life is to be, well, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly what you said, but something along the lines of, you can't really solve life, you have to experience it. And that really lets us experience a lot of things of life. And as you said as well, there is a lot of vignettes, and what does accumulate to a bunch of shorts. And I agree with you that the ending ties it together, but at the same time, even though they are shorts, it's more the feeling of the emotion of something that needs to be done that ties us together as well. For instance, I've gone to work this morning, and there can be a few segments of my life that can be essentially put into shorts in that time. Andy on the way to work, Andy in the office, Andy getting water in Lidl, right? I've had various little funny experiences on the way to work. I might have had a frustrating encounter getting water in Lidl, but at the same time, there is something I need to do today, which is get something for my cat's medication that wasn't done yesterday. So all those things are tied around that emotion. Sure, I'm on my way to work, but I need to get that over with because I need to have something else to accomplish. Sure, I'm queuing, and the reason why the queuing in the shop is annoying to me is because I have to get something done. And I think the movie operates on that level as well. In every scene we see on the Dog, Dog has Duck, but that reminds him of his friendship with Robot. Dog is an outsider, and he's not popular, and he's made fun of doing all these different events. Well, it would be better if he had Robot to console him. And there's all that underpinning it as well. So even though there's all these different shorts going on, it just has so much more texture to it. So it is pretty phenomenal that this is the director's first foray into anime as well, or animation or whatever. It's very impressive, and I wonder what these other films are like, actually. But yeah, very good movie. Very glad I checked it out. Very powerful movie.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.